The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for another great edition of the Skillshare webinar series by the National Center of Pavement Preservation, hosted by the Midwest Pavement Partnership. We kind of switched up our day and time, so thank you again for your willingness to join us and to learn. Just a reminder, my name is Rob Green. I'm with the Michigan Department of Transportation. I will be your host this afternoon. And our moderator this afternoon is a good friend of mine, Mr. Phil Rufus from Missouri DOT. Before we get started, for those of you who are new to the Skillshare webinar, we run our webinars a little different than some of the other ones. We like to encourage the interaction between you as the attendees and our panelists. So I'm strongly going to encourage you to utilize the question pod that's in the right-hand banner of the go-to system. Please, at any time, feel free to input your questions. Phil and I will make sure that the panelists get them so that they'll be prepared for the discussion. I guess I'd like to take it one step further, that as we're starting to answer some of these questions, if you have additional comments, please feel free to throw them in the question or the chat pod. That way we can try to continue to get our best interaction as if we were all sitting in the room. So, and then one other reminder is that a PDH certification will be emailed to you at the end of today's webinar. So to kind of get things going, today's topic, I think, is one that us as practitioners and owners wrestle with quite a bit. And that is, you know, we have these vast networks of pavement, and we always kind of come across that question: can I continue to preserve this section of pavement with a preservation fix? Or when do I need to kind of start looking at a heavier fix and resetting that preservation cycle? Or does it need to be a full-blown heavy rehab or even a reconstruct? Again, a lot of different thoughts, a lot of different philosophies out there on how agencies approach that. Today, we have a great panel for you that kind of provides their perspective. We've got Mr. Rick Miller from the Kansas DOT doing pavement management for a lot of years, has seen a lot of things. He's going to share his story with you. We got Mr. Rick Cross from Reed Company Valley Slurry Seal out of Sacramento, California. Has been in the preservation game for a lot of years as well, and is going to share what he has seen throughout his career. And then our third panel member really needs no introduction, but I was fortunate enough to be able to pull him out of semi-retirement. Mr. David Peshkin will be joining us and providing his thoughts on this topic as well. So without any further ado, I'd like to turn it over to Mr. Rufus to kind of get things kicked off.
Thanks, Rob. As we said earlier, our goal today, going back to all your questions, go ahead and address me in the chat, and I will be assigning some of those as we go through all of our presentations. Today's ultimate mission, let's determine, is there a next best fix? And we're going to do it by going from state level, then taking a contractor's perspective, as Rob mentioned, and then, of course, finally going to Mr. Peshkin, who's had many years in the business. So, as we wait and see Rick's screen, we have introduced the first gentleman from the great state of Kansas, our partner to the west of Missouri, who I couldn't help but notice is doing quite a bit of advertising, trying to get our vacation dollars to see the sights of Kansas. Mr. Rick Miller is joining us with many years, many years, starting from basically when Kansas began the pavement preservation. What has he done? What has he learned? At this time, I'd like to turn it over to Rick. Go ahead, Mr. Miller, teach us about Kansas. Rick?
All right. Well, thank you. Hello, everyone. I am Rick Miller. I am the pavement management engineer at the Kansas Department of Transportation, and my task today is to kind of explain to you why and how the Kansas Department of Transportation started doing pavement preservation, what we do, and some of the issues we are seeing with this philosophy, or at least our implementation of it. So my source for much of the history is a book entitled Milestones that you see on the right of the slide there from 1986. And I think it should be required reading for KDOT employees, but what I think doesn't always happen. And we start with formation of the Kansas Highway Commission in 1917. Work on the roads in the 19-teens was done by citizens in lieu of paying their poll taxes in some cases. They also used modern equipment for the time, like horse-drawn road graders. My other source for highway history is a big timeline that is displayed in our library. It states that the Kansas Highway Commission was formed in 1917, but they just passed money to the counties until 1929. The timeline also shows that in 1930, the budget was $3.5 million, of which $750,000 was designated to replacing materials on gravel roads. It also states that 2,100 miles that were surfaced with a bituminous mat. And by 1936, that mileage had increased to 8,000 miles of all-weather surfaces, 3,200 of which were not gravel or oiled earth. So I like the language in this blurb from 1949 that says Kansas legislature adopts a 20-year construction program to make existing highways tolerable while new ones were built. So it wasn't working on good roads to keep them good, but the goal was to keep them tolerable. And maybe they set the standards a little too low here. And tolerable or not, our biggest problem was transverse cracking on asphalt roadways, as the photo shows. This feature got Kansas roads rated as undrivable by Reader's Digest. I also had a boss who computed at one time that almost 1 mile of surface was missing on I-70 between Colorado and the town of Salina, 250 miles away, due to these shrinkage cracks. A lot of our resources were focused on dealing with this problem, and thus we couldn't really even keep the highways tolerable. The road conditions and political forces moved the governor and legislature to replace the State Highway Commission in 1975 with the Department of Transportation. This put a secretary from Oklahoma in charge. It broadened the scope from highways to transportation, and it recognized and started to act on the need to shift from construction to a maintenance focus. These two notes show that in 1979, we had an overlay and resurfacing program to deal with the state's rapidly deteriorating asphalt surfaces. It also states that one of the treatments we were working on was a cold recycling process. The note on the right shows that in 1984, the 1R program that provided up to 1.5 inches of asphalt overlay on 1,000 miles of roadway a year and preserves the state's considerable investment in its blacktop highways. KDOT was not doing all these things without outside pressure. The Kansas legislature was working on plans to tell KDOT how to build and take care of roads. Folks in KDOT wanted to make those decisions without being told by the fine folks at the State House exactly how. So we developed a priority formula to select capital projects and instituted a pavement management system to guide the selection of preservation projects. The state legislature also passed the transportation funding program in 1989. That is not a trivial thing. Money was required to make all this work, so we need to remember to thank those folks too. What this program did, besides providing funds, was to move from KDOT working on the roads to KDOT hiring contractors to do the bulk of this preservation work. So what did KDOT do to make these improvements? Basically, the idea was to do light work on pavements in good condition to keep them that way. It was set up to do about 1,200 miles per year, and the typical actions were chip seals and 1.5 inch overlays. Although the 1R program started with seals and 1.5 inch overlays, it progressed to a bunch of different action options, including the sampling here. Also note that this slide includes something we call equivalent thickness, which is a means of determining an equivalency between the action and an asphalt overlay. This allows for modeling and action comparisons that otherwise would be difficult. I don't expect anyone to read any of this, but it shows that since 1990, which is on the far right, through 2024, we have done about 1,500 miles of actions each year, and the color coding starting at the bottom is the thinnest actions, working the way up to the top of the thickest actions. So looking at the blues and purples at the bottom are the really light actions, and the oranges that you see to the left in 2024 are where actions start to reach 2 inches of equivalency. This is the last bar chart, I promise. This chart shows that we simply don't leave our pavements alone. That is, since 1989, 1 mile of pavement has been touched 12 times. That's what it shows clear on the far right. And while I doubt this, it probably is true. 989 miles been touched 8 times, 2,419 miles been touched 5 times. So frankly, we just don't leave our pavements alone. But what do we get for all this agitation of our pavements? I don't know who this guy is, nor why the slide is in Japanese, but I do know that the data in the graph behind him comes from our system. So this graphic shows what was behind the gentleman in the prior slide. The lines are reporting percent of the highway system in good and poor condition. Good is at the top and poor is at the bottom. The x-axis is years starting in 1983 and ending in this graph in 2012. There are 4 lines because we split the interstate and non-interstate. And the quick conclusion from this is that over this period of time, the pavement conditions improved substantially. This graph and the real world behind it made a lot of folks like these, a Kansas governor, 3 KDOT secretaries, and state transportation engineer very happy. But despite all that effort, we still have some issues. First, we can see and hear from the old timers that our preservation actions don't give us the benefits they once did. We also moved away from some of the heavy rehab type actions, thinking that we didn't need them since preservation could do it all, and we were wrong. We also know that the actions we chose in the past limit our choices today. For instance, this is a hot in place recycling project, and you see the flames on the road. What you may not notice is the pavement is actually on fire. This is not exactly the desired outcome of this process, and it leads to other problems like traffic trying to get past this train having to go through some fairly dense smoke. So we try to avoid situations where this happens, especially HAPR over multiple chip seals. Another problem we have is the depth we want to mill is not always good in terms of sometimes those boundaries are not clean and we get scabbing like this. This guy is peeling up that remaining surface with his steel-toed Nikes. And finally, this long history of light actions has resulted in unshapely surfaces too. This screenshot is showing a cross slope that is really flat on the left side and pretty close to what it ought to be on the right. This shape is a result of many actions over the years that have resulted in crown and cross slope and supers that are not what we want. These are more difficult to fix than you might think. So with that, the question becomes, what can we do? And I hope that my fellow panelists here can kind of pick up on that and take it from there.
Good. Thank you, Mr. Miller. Appreciate that insight. I have a couple of questions that have come. Help me out, guys. Send me a couple more. I got a couple, but not as many as I'd like. But a few comments to address. Go ahead and put them in the questions for me. And then as we go through Mr. Cross and then Mr. Peshkin, we'll of course grab those at the very end. So I'm looking forward to seeing your questions pop across. Some simple ones, some complex ones. Nothing's out of the board. So as we turn now to a contractor view, way out to California, way out to the capital of California, we have a gentleman, Mr. Rick Cross, who's been in the business for over 30 years. Began at the complete bottom, actually knows it from the nuts, came in as an intern, and now successfully runs his company's pavement preservation concepts. So I introduced Mr. Cross to bring us not only just what he's bringing to us from California and from his business point of view, but perhaps some additional insights, what's worked, what hasn't worked. So as I wait to see Rick throw up his presentation, we'll begin there. Todd, I'm not seeing it just yet.
I can give it back to you, Rick. Let me try.
Nothing goes perfectly every time. All right, good. We're at least getting some questions that are going through. All right, Rick, you have control. Let's see you. I'm going to go ahead and a couple more seconds. Here. Go ahead, Mr. Cross. Enlighten us. Rick Ross, everyone. Rick,
You're muted, Rick.
There we go. All right. 2008, are we back here again? So the term recession often triggers concern among the construction trades, and recent developments have led many to question, I know we're questioning, the likelihood of a potential recession here in the future and its severity. According to JP Morgan, a recession is now a likely outcome. It's a real topic we need to start thinking about again. Regardless of whether the impending recession in the county is mild or severe, or whether it even occurs at all, it is prudent for people on the panel here and in our audience to really consider how to prepare for those various economic scenarios. So there's four key reasons, or four reasons why the asphalt maintenance thrives in a recession. Number one, it's not necessary. It's necessary. It's not optional. Pavement still cracks, potholes still form, and asphalt still degrades. Even though everything else in a recession seems to slow down, we can all agree that the deterioration of our asphalt does not slow down. There's an excellent source of revenue for contractors like ourselves to go out and do this sort of work literally everywhere, from driveways to highways. Asphalt needs maintained. I think there's probably only one industry that's more recession proof than I think asphalt maintenance, and that's probably the local garbage companies and recycling companies. We'll always create garbage, and we'll always need someone to take it out. And the same with our highways and our freeways. They're always going to need maintained. If anything, we see that number go up, it's not going down. The type of funding, largely it's funded public funds, not private funds. We did see in 2008, and looking forward, we would expect that the private funds would tighten up a bit like they did last time, but we saw the reverse happen with our public funds. We saw the TARP program come out, where the allocated funds with the major investment groups came out to prevent a widespread collapse. Same thing with remember ARRA, the American Recovery Act. We're all familiar with these terms. We would expect to see the likes of that come again, where we would see a lot of pavement maintenance projects come out, which we did out here in the West. And lastly, what my PowerPoint will be on today is the versatility. What we found in 2008 is multi-layer applications have really improved and allowed agencies to allocate those dollars to some reactive maintenance, whereas before, if they had the budget that they had prior to 2008, they might have done more of the 2-inch mill and fill and full reconstructs. They didn't have the budget to do that, so then they used what we called multi-layer applications. So as we go through this, maybe ask yourselves on the call here, what did you learn? And we can share those in some of the questions and talk about that here at the end of the day. So we're all familiar with these, the single layer applications, single chip seals, or a single slurry or micro. This isn't a list of all of them, but down below you can see, we start from the top with fog seals, sand seals, all the way down to your modified chip seals, asphalt rubber chip seals, and all in between. It is cost effective to be proactive, and so leading up to a recession, it really does pay off to be in the preventative maintenance and be proactive with your seals that you're using before pavements go bad. It did make us realize that proactive maintenance has a whole new meaning once you hit a recession, because then there's less roads that you would have to retreat in those downturn times. The question is what can you do with streets like these? What if it's too late? I think prior to 2008, most resurfacing contractors would shy away from streets like these. This is where we would give strong recommendations for some serious R&R, some reconstruct. In some cases, you would mill some of this surface off and put some new asphalt on top of it. But but what if it's too late and you don't have the budget to treat streets like this? Although it's less cost effective, reactive maintenance still can be a cost effective alternative when you compare it to the heavy rehab projects, including reconstructs and even 2-inch mill and fills. We're all familiar with the bottom of the picture here, the Cape Seals. They're very popular out west here. I know they do them throughout the U.S. The double chip seal, we're very familiar with that. What we might not be so familiar with are the top two. A double fiberized seal, which is basically, you can see here in this drawing, it's a type 3 microsurfacing. It has a scratch leveling course, goes down the existing pavement, capped with a type 2 slurry, and both of those lifts have fiberized lifts to them. The top one is a 3-step. We won't get into that too heavy today, but it's a type 3 microsurfacing as a level, get some of the rideability of your streets back with an asphalt rubber chip seal capped with a slurry. Two both excellent candidates when you're talking about reactive maintenance. Here's a quick example. This is the city of Pocatello, Idaho in 2009, right in the heart and the heat of the recession that we had that started in 2008. Had a PCI rating of 38. What we noticed here in the background of this picture, you can see a big patch. We're going to go in and just patch the worst of the worst, but as we started cleaning this and sweeping this 2 days later, we noticed that the entire parking lot was that way. It really looked like a dirt parking lot. While doing those patches, they saw that the base was actually in pretty good condition. It was a nice, sturdy, strong base. It just the asphalt was really old and brittle and had never been maintained. They didn't do the preventative maintenance treatments that we discussed in our earlier slide. 2 weeks later, we were able to get that PCI rating up to a 79. And the picture you're looking at here now is a 5 years later picture that was taken in 2014, well after the recession, and something that was in place for them. And I was able to save the city of Pocatello quite a bit of money rather than having to totally rehab this parking lot. I do like to point out that some of the cracks are coming back. It's easily seen here in the thermoplastic or paint there with that arrow. You can kind of see the cracks. They're hairline cracks that are coming back through here, 5 years later, but still just what a night and day just difference between what it was in 2008 and what it was 5 years later. Believe it or not, this picture is 11 years later in 2020. And again, you're starting to see some of those cracks grow. There might not be the hairline cracks anymore, but when you take a closer look, they're starting to get to that 1/8 inch to 1/4 inch wide cracks. And here in 2024, we were back in the city of Pocatello on a neighboring project. They had us come over, and now they're back to preventative maintenance. They're no longer in the reactive category. And what we did is went through with a simple hot applied crack sealer, crack those minor cracks, and just put one layer of a type 2 on top. Here's the process. So for the step 1, you put a type 3 microsurfacing aggregate down at very heavy, 32 pounds per square yard. It had 0.15% fiber. If you look real close in this picture, you can see the interlacing, kind of the weaving textured mat there. That's the fiber introduced into the pug mill. And it was around 12% CQS1 HP. That's their nomenclature in Idaho. It was a 3% latex. Really, it was a microsurfacing emulsion that was used. We capped it with a type 2 microsurfacing of 18 pounds a square yard. You add those two together, you put down roughly 50 pounds a square yard. It has to be designed correctly. You don't want this, can't be done with a slurry when you're laying it that thick. The slurries are just designed to lay at 1 stone thickness, whereas the microsurfacing with the added chemicals and latex, you can stack the aggregate in multiple depths of your largest stone. And so that's what was accomplished in Pocatello, and they're very happy with it. Here's another picture in 2008 in Martinez, California. We had a PCI rating of 33, very similar in nature. It looked like a gravel road. When you went from top to bottom with this road, we just didn't really know how bad this road was until we swept it and got all the loose vines up and swept and found that we could, this was a good candidate for what we call a type 5. So the type 3 underneath a type 2 microsurfacing with fiber. 4 weeks later, it's pretty unbelievable. But if you do a proper scratch course with a steel strike off and you really feel the lows and you strike off even the highs of the valleys in that pavement structure, you can get it to ride pretty good. We were able to get that, 4 weeks later, we took this picture and it was a PCI rating of 81. There is a bit of a mystery that occurs while applying fiberized multi-layer placements. We've noticed in the first 2 years, residents that live on that street experience some kind of economic relief in their personal checking accounts. You'll see that here in your next photo. They went from traded in the grocery go-getter for a nice hot red sports car there, painted their house from brown to this nice gray color and trim, and even got some solar installed. So we're still trying to figure that one out. But 2019 here, 11 years later, I would say this street's really performing well. Again, I do like to point out, everyone, we have a tendency to oversell this product a lot because there's such a huge difference here 11 years later. And so, but we do like to point out that the cracks are starting to come back. We're only buying ourselves time, but it is a cost-effective treatment rather than just going right to the 2-inch mill and fills. So we're coming to the end here. When the Great Recession hit and the work dried up, many of the contractors went scrambling into federal projects. As we mentioned earlier, there was the TRAP or the ARRA, the American Recovery Act. Senate was putting those bills out for us, to get the economy going. It's important to remember the lessons of what we learned in 2008. And here's just a couple that I could think of. Maybe you could jot down a few and we could talk about them. But with a recession looming in the future here, it's definitely something we want to think about. And when we saw all this federal funds come down the pipeline, many of those contractors found out how different and challenging federal contracts can be. The paperwork can be daunting. The guidelines are very rigid, and the paperwork, it piles up quickly. The expectations varies depending on that federal office, and many contractors who were not familiar with the federal work, who jumped in, lost large sums of money, and many went out of business. Even if the work becomes less plentiful, contractors really should evaluate whether their company is ready to go into that public space. One of the issues we saw was the disadvantaged business enterprise requirements. The DBE work increases when you print more money and you put it into the system to perform more work. The amount of those jobs increase while the number of the DBE contractors just yesterday are the same. Just because you put the goals are higher, we see goals go higher with this DBE requirement. In many cases, a lot of those DBE contractors have gone out of business. And so when you go to list them for goals and then go to build that work, you notice that a lot of the disadvantaged business enterprise contractors, they're just not available. So created a major issue, major problem when building this federal work. Another thing worth mentioning is budgets. We offer, and many contractors in our industry offer, a free engineer's estimate. They'll just give them kind of the ballpark idea of what you want to do out there and just double check what that price of that product is in today's market. Since 2008, you can imagine we had inflation happen thereafter. Since then, we've had COVID. The COVID delays created a 17% surcharge on all asphalt-based product like fuels and other related commodities. Here recently, we're starting to see some tariffs be added to some of our products that we're receiving from overseas. And so, tariffs have been added to the bid. So with looming recession talks in the future, the price of yesterday is different today. One of the things we learned, 2007, 2008 pricing was entirely different by 2009. And so something to be aware of going into, maybe a 2026 season as we put these projects on a shelf and they're ready to bid. Your budgets might not be where they need to be to perform that type of work. So with that, I would just ask, consider those and many of the other questions that are coming in. So maybe it's something we can discuss today to be better prepared for looming recession. That's all I've got for you. Thank you.
Thank you, Rick Cross. I appreciate that. Thank you guys for sending questions. If I nag long enough, you will send them. So we have one more person, and let's take it away from state contractor and then pull it back to David Peshkin. I've known Mr. Peshkin for at least 11 years when I've worked with pavement preservation in mine, and obviously we've discussed earlier, semi-retired Mr. Peshkin. So as I look at yours, you're not quite all full screen yet. Mr. Peshkin, bring us your knowledge, and if you can, maybe a couple of reflections on the two previous one, a little ad-libbing if you could, because I know you have quite a bit of experience in both, I believe the Asphalt Institute, don't quote me on that, and then perhaps your entire seasoning. So at this time, Mr. Peshkin, take it away.
Very good, Phil. Thank you very much. And certainly have enjoyed listening to the other presenters so far. And hopefully the attendees are busy scribbling down their questions and submitting them so that we can have a good discussion following this presentation. So the topic I'm taking on is to try and look at a question that I hear a lot, and I'm sure the other panelists and many of you either hear it or ask it, is I've done preservation before, I've got one or more treatments on the pavement. Is it something I can do again, or do I need to move on, I think as Rob suggested, to a heavier treatment? So when is it still feasible, maybe from an engineering perspective, not from a specific treatment perspective, maybe not from a cost perspective, but from an engineering perspective, when is it feasible, and when might it not be feasible? So I've labeled the category of pavements that might be good candidates as repeat defenders, pavements that you can continue to protect with pavement preservation. And I think first and foremost, we're really looking at answering the question that we ask anytime we're considering pavement preservation, and that is the pavement a good candidate for preservation in general? Is it in good condition? And it can be in good condition and a good candidate for a first treatment. It can be in good condition after one or more treatments if it's still structurally sound. In other words, not showing load-related pavement distresses, or if the distress is present in terms of their classification, the amount of distresses, their severity levels, fall within acceptable guidelines or thresholds that the agency has established, that others who put together guidance on treatment selection and pavement selection for pavement preservation have identified. So I guess my number one consideration is the pavement in good condition. That would make it a good candidate to consider putting another pavement preservation treatment on it. The next consideration, and we've already seen some photos of pavements that aren't in great condition, but related to what we're seeing, when we're putting on a preservation treatment, we need to put something on that's going to stick. So is the existing surface shedding loose material that once broomed will either be cleaned up or will not be cleaned up, and that the material will continue to shed or there'll be loose material? If you don't have a competent surface to glue to stick that next preservation treatment on top of, it will not perform well. So it's conceivable that there's enough wrong with the existing surface, and let's suppose that it's a pavement preservation treatment already, that there's enough wrong with it that it can't be cleaned up. It doesn't mean you can't do preservation, but you might have to, instead of brooming, you might have to mill off what's there to come back with another preservation treatment. The next surface consideration is whether the existing surface is well bonded to the underlying pavement. This is a photo of a highway in Illinois that was shared with me by a IDOT colleague of a microsurfacing that had failed. So this is something, you know, you're probably familiar with, that the traveling public calls these potholes. They're not potholes, it's just a loss of the surface treatment, the microsurfacing in this case. And so if you were considering addressing this with another preservation treatment, say microsurfacing or a thin overlay or something similar, you might pause before you move forward. Why is this not bonding? Why is the existing surface coming up? Even if the pavement is structurally sound, even if when you look at it, there is no loose material, it's all been whipped away. Make sure you check on the shoulders, by the way, to see if that's an ongoing process. But the bottom line here is, do not try and glue something on top of something that itself is not well glued, not well bonded to the underlying pavement. You will not get a well-performing preservation treatment. The next consideration is just a suggestion that you should perhaps consider digging a little bit deeper. If the pavement's got some age on it, if it's got multiple treatments, and we're not in a recession or headed into uncertain times as Rick Cross described, and you really have some options to consider what's the right approach for a pavement, I think it really is helpful to do a little more investigation, spend a little more time, maybe spend a little more money, and try and learn more about what's going on in the pavement to answer those questions about whether it's still a good candidate for preservation. So what types of distresses are present? How bad are they? How widespread are they? Should you or can you take a few cores to look at subsurface conditions and maybe get an idea of what's going on beneath the pavement in terms of bonding of layers and maybe moisture near the or subsurface water that might be impacting long-term performance. So, you know, I know that funding may not be available to do detailed investigations on every pavement every time, but if you're making a significant decision on a road, considering preservation or maintenance or rehabilitation or even something more extreme and more expensive, gathering additional information, I feel, is always helpful. So one of those investigations that I think is especially helpful is a structural evaluation. And by that, I typically am thinking of a deflection testing with a falling weight deflectometer, which can evaluate the structural capacity of the pavement and tell you whether you still have a pavement in good structural condition that would enable you to go ahead and address surface conditions and still get many more years of life out of that pavement structure. Or if your surface looks okay, but underneath you don't have good structural support, and you might be surprised by the performance of, or the poor performance of the subsequent preservation treatment. Another topic that I'm reminded of is stripping, and in particular, I think back to the Strategic Highway Research Program studies several decades ago that looked at pavement maintenance, different pavement maintenance treatments and their performance around the country. Um, and there was a control section on highways, and one of the treatments was chip seal. There was crack sealing. I think there was a slurry treatment, and there was do nothing. And the performance of these pavements was monitored over a number of years. And on some projects, the researchers found that the pavements that had nothing, no treatment applied to them, performed better than the pavements that had chip seals, for example. And of course, that was counterintuitive and really got the researchers scratching their heads and wondering if they should even report those results, because the results didn't support what they wanted to say, which is maintenance and what we would come to call preservation actually help to extend the life of the pavement. To make the story a little bit shorter, what they found was that they had induced stripping in the original pavement by sealing it up and trapping moisture inside the pavement structure. So here's a core that illustrates that. Looking at the top of the photo down, you have a surface layer, another layer of competent asphalt, followed by a completely stripped layer of asphalt where the asphalt and the aggregate have completely separated. And obviously that's not a desired consequence of sealing up the pavement. Hopefully we don't have many stripping susceptible pavements out there anymore, but it is something that if you have pavements that have a history of stripping, you might want to investigate further before you cover it up with preservation treatment or a subsequent preservation treatment. So just to wrap up my portion of the presentation, a few summary suggestions. One is certainly look at existing conditions. Now, I understand that we can put preservation treatments on pavements in good condition and bad condition. We certainly have to temper our expectations if we're putting preservation on structurally unsound pavements, but understanding what you have both at the surface, what you can see, and potentially from additional investigation, what's beneath the surface, I think is a key to getting good cost-effective results from your pavement preservation treatments. With that said, there's no reason why you can't place multiple preservation treatments on top of each other. If the pavement's in good structural condition, if you're not getting delamination, if you're not getting shedding material that will continue to loosen even as you try and glue it down from the top, by all means, an additional preservation treatment after some years should be effective. Finally, to those who think, well, if the pavement's a good candidate for multiple preservation treatments, can't we just keep on doing this indefinitely? And I guess I can't say with certainty that you can't do this, but I think what we find is that at some point we reach the end of the structural life of the pavement, the materials have fatigued too much, there's nothing left to glue together, and maybe we can put a Band-Aid on the pavement and buy a year or two, but it really is not cost effective. It's just kicking the can down the road only a very short time. So at least that's my perspective, and appreciate the attention, and ready to hand it back to Phil, Rob, and everybody else. Thank you.
Thank you very much, David. Yeah, no, I guess I'm going to encourage all of our panelists to come back online. And Phil, I think our constant asking is paying off. I think we got a handful of good questions that, again, as we start this discussion, please, if something else comes up, throw it into the chat and we'll definitely come back to it. It's okay. Again, these ultimately this is for you and for all of us to learn and to better understand. So with that, Phil, if you want to kick off the panelist discussion portion, it is all yours.
Thank you. So to answer some questions just generically, and then I'll get to the individual ones. Yes, there will be a copy of this recording. At least 3 people have asked that questions. It will be on the National Center for Pavement Preservation's website under the video section. So if you want to see this, or you are so excited you got to show it to your wife or husband, it'll be on the National Center for Pavement Preservation's website. And yes, all the slides are available and we will interact. If you have any questions, whether you do it now during the discussions, just ask them. And if I can't get the answer, I will have one of our people reach back to you over your internet, over your address, your email address. So I've got a couple of questions here and a couple of them from the screen that I've jotted down. So I think we'll start off, let's start with a softball. I'll go back and start with Kansas. Mr. Miller, you've commented on road cross sections that start to see issues after too many fixes. Has KDOT addressed this over time? Let's just take us back 15 years in general. And if so, how have they addressed it? Mr. Miller.
So the cross sections, do we try to address it? Yes. Have we addressed it? No, would be the simple answer to that. And part of that is that the way our specs read, first of all, it says you either put it back to what it was, which may have not been what you wanted at all, or you put it to what it's supposed to be. But since we generally don't know what it was, the claim will always be that they put it back to what it was if it's not what it's supposed to be when they're done. But it really comes down to a problem in a lot of cases of we're balancing a lot of different things together at the same time while we're doing these projects. A lot of them are, well, typically we mill to fix that cross-section problem. And as you're milling, you start to run into the scabbing problems that I showed in the slide. So that's one of the things that can bite you is you can't get it milled at the way you want it to because you start creating the scabbing as you're going. And so that's one of the ways that we sort of get bit by that. And then the other piece of that is that it's a numbers game. The contractors are clearly trying to mill so they get the right proportions so that they can reuse as much of that material as possible in their recycled mixes. So they're playing a quantities game. We're playing a string line game of what the shape ought to be. And those two things don't necessarily work out together. So the answer to your question is yes, we are still trying. No, we do not have a great solution yet for how you get the shape you want in the end when you're prescribing what the action is that you're asking them to do.
Perfect. Not knowing a lot about Caltrans, that's on me. Do you have anything from California cross that are you seeing anything out there? Again, I know you don't work for Caltrans particularly, but out on the West Coast, that's a fairly large state. Do you see anything similar, and have you seen them do anything, or more importantly, as a contractor, are you promoting any way to try and tackle that issue as well? Mr. Cross?
With regards to the shrinkage and the cracks with what?
When you're, no, sorry. When you're screwing with the cross section, you go down there, you start scabbing. That was an example. If the answer is no, don't sweat it. But I was just curious because I don't know a whole lot about California right now. If they have the same type of issues we have here in the Midwest, where you go down, all of a sudden you're playing a numbers game versus, as you say, a string line game.
Well, we are seeing the micro grinding be more prevalent in our markets to where they are micro grinding because of years, and some of it's overlay work. Because I think the overlay really starts giving you that crown. You get in some of the older neighborhoods out here that are been developed for 25, 30 plus years with a couple resurfacing treatments on top of an overlay, you do start getting that crown. And so we are seeing an increased amount of grinding in our markets. Even in the Arizona market, we have an office in Arizona, and it's a prevalent process to see a micro grind, get some road reshaping done, and then we do a resurfacing treatment. But the scabbing you do have to be careful of. I mean, because if you're not grinding deep enough, you're going to end up with more scabbing. If you don't grind deep enough, you don't take care of the crown, and there is kind of a marriage that needs to happen there. But it is something new.
Yeah, when I did this job here in MoDOT, I always had a hard time marrying those two contractors together, the grinders and the pavers. So I haven't had a lot of victory on doing that. I mean, I'll ask you, David, you got anything? I don't expect this to be up your bailiwick, but if you've got any examples out of Ohio at all, I'd be more than willing to listen. Indiana.
Well, Illinois is my area, but no, I mean, the one thing that the one thought that comes to mind is, you know, when you get in a situation like that, and you know what you see on the ground really calls for a change in direction, but you're already going in the direction that you headed out, and you don't have the contractual mechanism, you don't have, you know, the specifications, that nothing is right, set up right to do the right thing. What do you end up doing? You know, so you get on the project with the Millers. Yeah, I can describe that scenario and pose that question, and then mute myself and sit back and listen to provide some answers for us.
Yeah, that's very amusing because I just pointed at it. I'm not sure if you're looking at my screen. That's question number 13. It's a nasty one, but I'll just go down here quickly. The subtitle references, I don't know what I'm going to ask yet. The subtitle references the next best step. Do you have any go-to treatments when that happens at all? Sort of an if-then situation. So if you're down, is there a go-to treatment? Can you add fibers? I'm ad-libbing the last part to get to that step, which leads me to where I'm going to go with this. You like to talk about fibers, Mr. Cross. Is that something when you're potentially, I'm just going to say it, magic bullet? Is that a go-to thing out in California where you're like, oh, crap, we may have a situation where we'd add some fibers and get an additional amount of life? There's a lot to unpack there, Mr. Cross. What do you got?
I think I understand the question. So, I mean, going back to what Mr. Peshkin said, I mean, it doesn't look like it in those photos, but that pavement it's a pavement issue. They were old and they were brittle and they were dry. The underlying pavement was pretty solid. We didn't have a lot of moving parts. There was no pumping. You know, you go through and you look for pumping, you know, fines from the base and whatnot. We're not seeing pumping in those. And so it really goes back to your expectation of what you want to do when you're in reactive maintenance. Everything I shared wasn't a preventative maintenance. It wasn't proactive. This is reactive, you know, cautionary, just to know that that's a reactive measure to take. And we're still looking for good candidates. The big, long, transverse, longitudinal cracks, where you have shrinkage like Mr. Miller shared, the fiber is really not helping that a lot. When we're seeing asphalt pavement failure just from it being old and brittle, but it's still stable, we're still looking for it doesn't look stable, but it really is. It's not moving. There's not a lot of movement. That's where we're seeing the success with the fiber. And the fiber isn't a magic bullet. It really isn't. The three-step that I briefly mentioned at the beginning half of the PowerPoint is a more aggressive way, because you have that asphalt binder kind of acts as a SAMI interlayer, and that really helps prevent a lot of that cracking from coming back through. The micro, it cracks up through the micro as a micro crack, but it doesn't penetrate the asphalt rubber. And so you have a little more success there, but still there's not a magic bullet to deal with a lot of this. You really have to look for sound pavement to apply a lot of these products. But when you're in reactive mode, it's definitely better. And that example I shared was, I think, $12 a square yard versus, you know, $30 a square yard. So it really does go down to budgets at that point.
That's perfect. I'm going to come back to that because there's actually a question about that example, but I want to bounce to Christopher's question, and it's addressed to you, Mr. Cross. Comparing a double fiberized seal to a traditional cape seal, do you see a similar performance over time, or does one better than the other? Rick Cross?
That's a tough question. There's just not there's just not a fix-all, and every road treatment is different, and they all behave differently depending on the loads of, you know, traffic behaviors. A cape seal is a great product. I think that's why it's so popular, and everyone on the call really knows about cape seals. They really work well. What I don't like about the cape seal is you don't get the leveling. They follow the contour of the existing road. So the binder goes down, we put a chip seal down, whatever that road was like prior to putting the chip seal down is pretty much that same rideability carries up through the different lifts that we put on. The difference with the double fiber or even the 3-step example is you're getting a leveling scratch course down. And so therefore you're getting much better rideability and a better product at the end. So that's the biggest difference in my mind. And then the binder that you put down on the chip seal, it's waterproofing the road, where the fiber, you're getting some waterproof characteristics for sure, but kind of going back to some layman's terms, it's like putting a really heavy sweatshirt on in a rainstorm. We're waterproofed, but only for so long. It's going to eventually get through the micro and slurry mats. You want to get 100% waterproof, you're going to put a rain jacket on. That's where your chip seals, putting that asphalt binder down on the road, you get 100% waterproof at that point. So hopefully that answered the question.
No, that's wonderful. Thank you. David, I want to ask this question. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say before we get too far removed from the cross slope question, Blair from Kansas also hopped in just to kind of share a little bit more perspective and makes a comment that profile milling can cause issues too when you're trying to restore that cross slope. It can create issues with the consistency of the wrap that is generated. This is especially true when you have high AC content surface treatments. So again, just as we look to try to find ways to restore that cross slope, and sometimes we think the micro milling may be able to do it. It sounds like there are still some issues to kind of keep in mind there as well. So thank you for the additional context, Blair. Sorry, Phil, you can jump back to your next question, sir.
No, you're okay. I want to start with David and then go to Mr. Miller. 2-3 questions now. I'll use this one and paraphrase it if I could. It'll go back to the Martinez, California question 2. How much patching, just again, opinions, talking out loud, do you, David, in your experience, and I apologize, I said Ohio, I meant Illinois.
It's all right.
Do you consider to be too much from your surface treatments? And another person kind of asked a similar stuff, because I'll just finish with this. Surely there was quite a bit of patching on the Martinez, California job, but I'd like to start with David and then Mr. Miller first. Is there something that we can take away that says, you know what, it's too far gone? I guess kind of how I'm going to spin that. The exact question is how much patching is too much in order to get that value? I'll start with David.
That's a great question. And, I know that there are some rules of thumb. My engineering perspective would be, first, what's the patching fixing? I showed pictures of delamination, and if it's delaminations that you're patching, I'm concerned. But if it's true localized fatigue failures, and they're localized, then by all means, some patching would really help to improve the performance of what you put on top. So if it's patching of wheel path fatigue cracking that's beyond low severity, and I know I'm getting down in the weeds on this, but man, this is where I live, in the weeds. So, if you've got medium and high severity fatigue cracking in the wheel path, patching that, restoring the integrity of the pavement would improve the performance of the subsequent treatment. But beyond a certain number, and I'm going to throw out seat of the pants, maybe 10%, maybe 12%, or, some percentage of the total wheel path area. At some point, you're better with a reworking or major rehab or reconstruction of the pavement, where a bunch of patches are not cost effective and will still leave areas that are going to fatigue later on. So same with crack sealing. I mean, there's a lot of treatments that work better or most of them work better when you seal cracks beforehand. But there are some treatments that seal the cracks in bulk, that at a certain point you stop sealing individual cracks, you seal the entire surface in one manner or another, or take it up and do another preservation treatment. So yeah, I just regurgitated a bunch of words, and I'm sorry if it made you sick, but not an easy question, Phil.
These are all nasty, and that's why you have me delivering. I'll ask Kansas the same question because I have an answer from Missouri, but Rick, your thoughts, and then I want to go back to Martinez, California before I let this one go. Mr. Miller?
So from the Kansas perspective, on most of the pavement preservation type actions that we do, we would not do patching ahead of time. If it was a very localized little problem area, then yes, we would do that. But for most of our projects, we're not going to pick an action that does not take care of a pavement that would need patching. So we would mill something like, even if it was 10 to 15% of the pavement that needed patching, we'd be more likely to mill through that and then do whatever action is over the top of that. And then as David was talking about the crack sealing too, we're pretty careful to make sure that that gets done at least a year ahead of any of our projects. Because if you don't and you hot mix over it, you get the bump associated with that. So that's kind of our approach to that, is we tend to stay away from what I'll call the handwork, the patching type things that you have to do that are piecemeal types of things. We try and select scopes that avoid that.
Perfect. The Martinez, California exact question, Mr. Cross. There was a lot of distress. Surely there were many repairs prior to this treatment. Is this true?
Yeah, so there was in Pocatello, the very first one there at City Hall, there was a big 20-foot by 40-foot wide patch. That was before they cleaned the parking lot and realized that the entire parking lot looked like what they thought was an isolated, literally an isolated location or fatigue. What they thought was isolated, realized the whole parking lot looked that way. They really just thought they had a raveling issue. And then once we were able to sweep it, it went to where it wasn't isolated or localized, and just really key in on that I think everyone on the panel is saying that, isolated, localized fatigue or failure when you're in preventative maintenance, absolutely do some small patching. I think it's going to help you, but it's one of those things that if you're finding where it's not isolated and it's where do I stop, where do I begin, you're starting to run out of paint in your paint can. You're really throwing a lot of good money on top of that at that point. My example of Martinez, there was zero patching. That was all type 3 fiber and a type 2 slurry that went on top. It's pretty remarkable. It's really unbelievable until you go see it in person. I mean, you guys saw the photos. You try to get back to that exact angle, same time of day where that you took the previous photo, so it just looks like that before and after. And it's still unbelievable until you go see it for yourself. So in that location, it was the same thing. You would have ran out of paint. You wouldn't know where to start and stop patches, and there was just way too much to do there. So no patching was done in Martinez.
That's impressive.
That was just one of 10 streets we did too. So it can work, but you definitely slow your process down. As pavement maintenance guys, we like to get in on a project and just haul butt and go. You start running into what I call reactive maintenance. You really have to slow your whole process down and make sure you're really taking some attention to detail on, someone mentioned it earlier about properly cleaning, making sure there's no fines and raveling that are still left, or you're going to end up with some debonding issues.
Well, and with that Martinez example, I'm assuming so you're saying that you basically filled some of those deeper distresses with just straight up fiberized material and screeded them off to kind of rebuild that cross section. Okay.
The fiberized micro, the water that was pumping out of that mix was within, minutes later. It was a 4% latex, I think, in Martinez. Where in, Pocatello, we had a 3% latex, but a high mod type material went down in Martinez. And again, it's pretty. The steel strike off is what really makes that look nice at the end, because you're filling the voids down below, and you're not building up the peaks. You're only building up the valleys of each hole. And so that's where the trick lies.
Thanks, Rick. I didn't mean to walk on you. I'd be remiss, because we keep going back to fiber, and I realize this isn't a fiber broadcast, but I'd be remiss if I didn't ask Brent's question. So I'm just going to go ahead and ask it, and then Stu wants to talk about it. Notice the fiber treatments were in low volume roads and parking lots. Is there an application for this on highways that would be applicable as a next best step? For example, with 129,000 commercial trucks. I'm going to the DOT first and then Mr. Peshkin. Mr. Miller, do you use this stuff? Do you use fiber at all in Kansas? And if not, that's a quick answer.
I don't think we use much, or I'm not aware of it unless it's being done like research level.
Sweet, I'll take it. We use it in MoDOT. And the answer, Brent, if you want to give me an email is fine. No, I use it on arterials. There's a couple of things we can discuss offline, excuse me, on when you put it, how long you wait, yada, 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 to turn traffic back on, and you can have success that way. So yeah, over 100,000 cars a day on arterials. Yeah, we have a micro surfacing. We call it a type 2. I don't know if that equates. Oh, great, I lost Mr. Miller. Well, now it's the MoDOT show. And yes, we've been successful in utilizing that, and not just on Rosen. How about you in Illinois, David?
I don't know if the state's using it, and I'm not that familiar with fibers. I do know there's a big industry push to put fibers in hot mix, and obviously it's being used on high volume roads. And Rick Cross, obviously can speak to that with his experience. But I think it's going into preservation treatments as well. And I don't think it's a low volume. I don't think there's anything that limits it to low volume at all, but I'm going to yield the rest of the time to Rick Cross.
And I guess before Rick, I'll provide a Michigan perspective. We're experimenting with it as well. The last couple of years, we've put a handful of what we've called soft binder fiber micro down. And so now we're in the evaluation period of that material. So, and that was placed on some higher volume routes, not necessarily interstate yet, but I do believe we did put them on some higher volume state routes. So.
Yeah, I blew that. I got your answer, Brent, so I'll just email you that answer. So appreciate that. I want to switch back. I think I'll start with David again. Just here's a question from, I believe, Allison. Let's see. Nope, different person. My apologies.
No, it's our good friend Vince from West Virginia.
Yeah, Mr. Allison, my apologies. I'll just say it out loud. Provided, oh no, there's too many questions coming in.
Provided we have a new pavement constructed, good base, and it's considered perpetual, would it be reasonable to look at a 50-year life cycle with only preservation treatments, like a microsurface?
Thank you for stepping in. A question popped up at the top of the screen. Thank you, Mr. Green.
Hi, Vince. Good to hear from you. Been a little while. So I know that there are some agencies, at least conceptually, have put together 50-year life cycle treatments for perpetual pavements. I think, so obviously the concept of perpetual pavement is everything below stays in place and you just zip off and replace or just place on top of the existing surface, and your underlying structure remains intact. I've seen some of the schedules that have thin overlays or overlays on a 15-year cycle, or maybe a little longer. So they might have 3 cycles of overlay to go with chip or micro or some other more conventional preservation treatment. So I think conceptually, it's definitely possible. I don't know. I'd be interested to hear about the economics of, investing that stout structure, the perpetual pavement, investing more upfront so that you can invest, so that you spend less to preserve it later on. But I think I'll stick to conceptually, it's feasible.
We do not do that here. It's usually a 30-year cycle. We are not that gutsy to put it up to 50. Rick, you missed it.
I missed it.
Rob, read that back to Rick for me. I'm curious if Kansas, if you had go ahead and read that one again. for
Yeah,
Rick Cross.
I've got it, so
Millvan.
I can go with it. Yeah, so
Okay.
I'm going to say that we hope we better be able to get 50-year perpetual pavement lives out of a bunch of our pavements, because we have a 10,000-mile system of which half has never even been designed. So it's all just
Yeah.
built up over time to begin with, and that's going to continue. I don't see any way, play the numbers game there, and we're not going to be designing and constructing a whole bunch of those pavements. So we're going to have to maintain them with some sort of a perpetual type treatment. And these are not necessarily pavements that have been designed to be perpetual pavements. It's just the pavements that we've inherited or have. I know when there was a point in the early 90s when we celebrated because every state highway had at least 1.5 inches of asphalt on it, or was concrete to begin with. So we hit that kind of a place in time where we at least had asphalt material on every one of our state highways to work with at some level. The bulk of them were built up over time, chip seal kinds of things. So we certainly are planning to continue to do, to work from the top and basically keep those pavements alive from the top.
Perfect. I'm going to stay with you, but I'm going to take a question from Phil. He's been waiting patiently, and then I'll go back to him again. I'll read the question to you, Rick, because you're again in the DOT, and then maybe Rob and I can answer as well. And then, of course, the others. If using a pavement management system to determine if a chip seal or other treatment is viable, wouldn't having a lower limit on the condition triggers help to prevent recommending that preservation, where rehab would be more economical if you had lowered that limit? Mr. Miller?
So the first part of the answer to that is we use an oddball pavement management system that does not use decision trees. And so therefore so it doesn't fit into that. I can also say that the system that we use, favorite treatment is chip seals by far. And we have to put in some limits to that to make sure that it doesn't, I mean, if it had its way, we'd do 7,000 miles of chip seals on a 10,000 mile system every year. And if you want to talk about diminishing returns, we get into those in a hurry doing that. But so we limit it so it doesn't do that. But yes, you're right. If we did have and we will soon have a pavement management system that has decision trees in it, and that would be one of the things that we'll have to work out, is where is that balance between the rehab type? Well, it's the question that we have for this webinar is where do we go between preservation and rehabilitation? So,
Michigan, I know you have experience. Your thoughts, Mr. Green?
Well, kind of similar to Kansas, we don't have a formal PMS system that's kind of making these decisions for us. And so right now we kind of rely a lot on engineering judgment, and we talk a lot about the life cycle costs and understanding that the economics, chip seal is a great fix, but is it truly the best? And we rely on those field observations to be able to determine, where is it truly viable versus when we need to be looking at a bigger fix. So again, probably not the greatest way to help you answer that question, but hopefully as we implement a PMS, we will begin to tackle that question too.
And in Missouri, when I used to run that 3 years ago, we do actually have a system. So if then, which is what I had remarked earlier on the question, we do have an if then. Usually if then we'll throw it out and put it into rehab. Conversely, to build on Phil's comments, and I'll just answer it sort of, we have that 30-year plan. So as long as that 30-year plan, you go ahead and put down your mix, then you treat it, then you U-boz it, then you mill it. And that's kind of what MoDOT's successfully done, at least in this district. So that decision tree does exist. I don't think it's actually printed, but there is a decision tree therein. Which brings me to Larry Schofield, because that dovetails right into it. Larry's thoughts, I'll read it directly, is it seems the only way to address what should be done is through LCCA and not showing pavement treatment lives. Do you have any comments on that? I don't have anybody to throw this to.
I was gonna throw that one to David and see if he's got any initial thoughts.
Let's go with David. being, I know you know Larry quite well.
About that Schofield guy, he's been beating up on me for about, I don't know, Larry, 65 years or something. So, I mean, I think there's two sides to that. You have to look at life cycle costs. You don't always, but you really should look at expected treatment life and treatment cost and compare it to options that have different lives and different costs. But, you know, we're not required to on every project. Federal funds don't require it for smaller projects. States don't necessarily require it. But to me, it certainly makes sense to take those factors into consideration, whether it's, you know, life divided by, or cost divided by life, cost divided by number of years, or some other more sophisticated analysis. But the other sort of less tangible factor is expected performance over the life. And we all have sort of a gut feeling about what different treatments give us in terms of riding comfort and lower maintenance costs over their life cycle and so forth. And those are harder to consider in an LCCA, but it doesn't hurt to try. And I don't know, Larry, if that that sort of addresses your question or not. So again, I'm gonna step down and let somebody else tackle that.
Anybody else want that hot potato?
So I'll take a stab here. Couple of things is, first of all, I don't really like going LCCA because I already mentioned that 50% of our pavements have to last perpetually. So how does that work in an LCCA, right? So, and the other piece of that is, it's not that we do not have a pavement management system. Our pavement management system is a true optimization. It is not driven by decision trees that way, meaning that we set an amount of money and then we say, what's the best use of that money in terms of doing different types of actions across our network. And so what that ends up doing, and I could bring up steady state, but I know that I'll set Mr. Peshkin off if I do, so I won't say it very loud. But that's the way that we work. The problem is that we say we want to get to a position, you know, where in the future we will be able to continue maintaining our system. That's really what the steady state is doing. And so that's what we're trying to do with our system every year, is we turn around and we say, what set of actions is the best fit for the amount of money that we have and the current set of conditions that we have and the current set of options in terms of treatments that we have, so that we will in 7 or 8 years be in a good position again, or continue to be in a good position in terms of making those decisions.
Perfect. I'm running out of time, so I'm going to condense the two. And again, thank you for throwing questions continuously at me. As you noticed, it actually went up when you were typing. So we got two other areas. We got to go back to fiber again because there's 2 more questions. And then I'd like to finish with some questions regarding weather and impacts accordingly. So, Mr. Cross, we haven't heard from you in a while. Have you had a chance to mill up any of those fiber treatments? And did that cause a wrap problem? I realize, again, this is not about fiber, but there sure seems to be a little bit of vested interest. Have you built anything, Mr. Cross? And has it messed up your wrap?
We haven't yet. So we're into the wrap business. Obviously, the recycled asphalt pavements are a predominant thing that we're doing out west here in our Arizona office, and Caltrans just got through putting through some specifications on wrap for their freeways. So pavement maintenance, but we have not had the opportunity to grind up any of that and see what that does for wrap. I mean, you're not going to run into the fabrics, the issue that you have with fabrics for sure, but we have not yet. The other thing I just wanted to back up to and really know that, everyone's really laser focused on the fiber. It's fiber in a multi-layer application as well. We're seeing a diminishing returns when it's just a single application. Not sure where I stand on that yet, how much more value you gain out of just a single application with fiber, but it is the double applications with fiber that we're seeing the largest success.
Correct. And ours only been down for about 7 to 8 years, so we're not quite there yet too. But again, I'd be ignoring somebody if I didn't ask Allison the same question you, Mr. Cross. You stated that the fiber works well on pavements when there's no movement. Does this mean that your double, now we know double fiber, is not a good treatment when there's cold winters and warm summers? I know in California, it's always warm. Wink.
Well, you'd be surprised. We've got a variety of climates here. I mean, so I mean,
Your state's like 10 times size bigger than mine. I get it. Anyway, can you answer Allison's question just broadly if you want to? Does that mean that's not a good fit for a double micro with fiber when you've got cold?
it can be. You just need to have the right expectation. I mean, you're really going to take that 2 or 3 inch crack. We've had the 2 or 3 inch crack that just really should have some kind of a mastic or hot mix product in it, and you turn it into a hairline crack. I think that's a win. But when that crack moves, it's going to travel up through the double fibers as well and just come back as a hairline crack. So we mark that up as a success, but it's not a treat all, cure all. You really want to start looking at the 3-step process and get into your asphalt rubber binders if you want to try to cure cancer. Those cracks they're tough to beat. So yeah, it works well in an alligatored area.
Perfect.
Better than what we would think.
So my final thoughts, sorry, keep working on you. No, that was on me. I'm sorry, Rick. My final thought, I got too many to get to. And again, thank you guys. I mean it from my heart. If you didn't ask these questions, we would not have as much of a livid discussion, but I got to bring us back to money. 1, 2, 3 questions talked about purchasing power today versus 15 years ago that kind of latched onto that 2008 thing. I'll just ask it, and I'll go with Rick, and if you guys want to join afterwards, do you see as a contractor, I know you're not a state agency, that the purchasing power in 08 that you referenced, is it a lot lower now, and does that in fact lend more credence to a pavement preservation versus a rehabilitation, a quote, next best treatment? Your just general thoughts. Rick, Cross?
Yeah, I think I mean, we almost doubled in size in 2008. And I think we're going to see that again if this recession comes. It's a cost-effective way to treat streets that would otherwise be in. I mean, we all saw the pictures, but if we had the money to go in and reconstruct those streets, I think we would have. And it's not there. And so when you see how far the technology with a lot of the micros and the fibers, and, rubber and all that, hit the street, and we're putting them up on streets that should be rehabbed, and we're seeing the results we're seeing, I think we're going to see more of that work come out than we did in 2008, because we have a track history now. We did it, it worked, and now I think if this repeats itself, I think we're going to see an increased amount of that work for sure.
David, Rick, any other continue on with Mr. Cross's thoughts? Purchasing power less now, leading more credence to a PP environment?
Well, I'll bounce back to Mr. Schofield's question. If it's cost effective, why aren't we doing it anyway? If it's not cost effective, and we just do it when we have less money, then so we understand the cost portion of it. It's the effective portion. So we're now accepting lesser performance, either shorter life or less improved conditions, because that's all we can, that's all the money we have. I mean, I think we have to, to repeat that one of my least favorite mantras of right treatment, right pavement, right time. If it was the right treatment at the right time before, then let's do it again. If it wasn't, why are we all of a sudden considering that we need to do it? But I don't own any pavements other than my driveway, which last year I paved in concrete.
Okay, well, I got 3 minutes left. So Kevin, Phil, Ashok, Joe, Dylan, Adrian, Blair, Greg, I will get those answers to you. Panelists, if I could be so bold, I'll email you to make sure that we get everybody. Hey, look, I thought we had enough time, but apparently not. So At this time, I'd like to turn it back to Mr. Green for some final thoughts. Rob?
Yeah,
Thank
thank you,
panelists.
Phil. Yes, thank you, Phil. Thank you, panelists. So real quick recap, lessons learned. Kansas DOT shared their experience that unfortunately we can't preserve our way out of, bad pavements. However, David shared that, if the pavement still has a good structure to it, there's no reason why you can't continue to do subsequent preservation treatments. And even our good friend, Mr. Cross, shared that you can kind of push the limit of that deterioration, maybe in some more lower volume situations, but not always the case. Thank you very much, panelists. Thank you very much, attendees, for sticking with us. Thank you for the questions. Again, without your questions, these webinars would not be as successful as they are. Based upon the questions, I'm kind of getting this feeling that, our next topic might be on fibers. There seemed to be a lot of interest there. So I'll kind of start digging into that one and see what we can do. My final statement, definitely not least, but I want to say thank you to any of our veterans out there as we're approaching Memorial Day this weekend. Thank you. It's because of you that we're able to do what we do and can have these conversations and share ideas freely. So thank you very much, everyone. Got questions, comments, please feel free to reach out. If you've got other future topics that you'd like us to cover, shoot me an email, and the task force will definitely look for some panelist members to dig deeper into it. But with that, thank you, everyone, and enjoy the rest of your day.